A very good evening to you and a warm welcome to our program Business Today, and this is your weekly business show on Channel I, where we give you an in-depth look at today's business landscape. And we do have a very important personality in the studio. And today on Business Today, we'll be talking about our markets and the impact on our markets because of the pandemic. We do have an important personality, as I mentioned, who could elaborate on this topic and who could give us an insight as to what's happening not only here but the global arena as well, because this pandemic is not just for our country, it has affected globally as well. So we do have a personality who could tell us more about this. So before I introduce the personality, let's have a look at who our personality is and some details of our personality.
Mr. Ruwan Perera joined NDB Wealth in 2009 and has vast experience in financial services sector, including fund management and primary dealer industries. He currently serves as the Chief Operating Officer of NDB Wealth Management Limited. Ruwan is an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants UK and Chartered Global Management Accountant. He also holds MBA in Finance, a Master of Arts in Financial Economics and a BSc degree in Physical Science from the University of Colombo.
We are honored to have with us today the Chief Operating Officer of NDB Wealth Management Limited, and he is also, as mentioned previously, the President of the Unit Trust Association of Sri Lanka. A very good evening to you, Mr. Ruwan Perera.
Good evening to you too, Sharifa.
And we are honored to have you here with us on our program Business Today. And today, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we'll be talking about our market and how this pandemic has affected this market as well, because it's vital to discuss about that, and many people are dependent on the economy, and so is the country.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, my first question would be about the impact on our markets due to COVID-19 locally, and also we'll talk about the global arena as well.
Okay, Sharifa, actually the COVID-19, even in my previous meeting, we were thinking, we thought that it would have ended by that time, after some time, but it really has been a long stay. It's been there for over now 1 year. We are hitting the second year. So there's a major impact local as well as for globally. And I would say now at the moment everyone is looking at the local scenario, because we are at a lockdown. People are talking about difficulties of earning income, and of course there's an impact on daily wage earners, things like that. But of course it's the same across the world as well. If you look at places like even Vietnam, the Asian countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, all those countries are having another wave. They are struggling. Their factories are closed. Because of the lockdown, the factory outputs have slowed down. And except China, I would say China is managing it pretty well, but most of the Asian countries, the Asian region, is struggling with the production. Mm-hmm. And there are shortages of raw materials. There is difficulties in shipping already. For space for containers, shipping ports, there are issues. So there's delays. So that has really impacted the global supply chain, including that has, for example, the semiconductors that are manufactured for vehicles, you can't get it across. So there is a shortage in semiconductors for vehicles. So Europe, it's hitting the Europe, because, for example, vehicles like the manufacturers like Audi, Volkswagen, they are struggling to have raw material and the other products, product components. So that's really having a slowdown. And also what will happen is there's a price increase also because of the shortages. So
this is not only for our country.
It's not only for our country. So, and already the Delta variant is hitting globally. You take places like USA, which has been vaccinated, and USA, UK, all these countries are getting hit. And now there's a debate between US and Europe whether you should allow US citizens to be coming, because I mean the spread is high. So there are certain, I mean it has impact one of the, I mean it has impact the tourism industry, which is, I mean globally, I mean if you look at, I mean we are struggling with the tourism, but if you take a country like Malaysia or Singapore, which is very much dependent on tourism, like 25 to 35 million tourists coming for a year, drying, that means it's a huge impact to that economy as well. So it's not only for us, I mean it's globally happening. So it's a tough time. It's a tough time, and also because there has been some sort of now, for example, the Europe West and the West side has been they've been starting some sort of activity. So the productions went up. I mean, and the oil prices have started to move up as well. So, and most of the commodity prices have gone up, because there's also, in addition to the supply, there are issues of delivery. The shipping, there's a bottleneck in shipping. So there are supply chain bottlenecks that has happened. So this has globally has entangled into a big issue. Not only, we are only seeing one part of it.
Exactly, and you very correctly mentioned that this is not just happening in our country, but it's a global issue. And there are the Western countries which are dependent on labor and services from countries like the Asian countries you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think with that in mind, the apparel sector is operating, isn't it?
Apparel sector, no. On the other side, the apparel sector is operating, but still, I mean, you haven't seen the kind of demand that was used to have in the, because most of the apparel was exported, and even the apparel sector is getting hit, because now the manufacturing is there are manufacturing delays in places like Vietnam, because Vietnam is in a lockdown.
Right.
And places like, I mean, there are the Asian countries, certain countries are in lockdown, and those lockdown, because of that, people can't operate factories. At least in Sri Lanka, what has happened is they have allowed the export-oriented industry to work, but in some of these countries they haven't allowed it. So because of that, even some of the factory outputs are not coming out.
And let's also touch on investments and how the exchange rate has impacted on this.
Well, that's a very hot topic for Sri Lanka, because now we were mainly, I mean, another area that has really impacted is the investments. Now globally, because of this situation, no one is looking at the investments, and so naturally, I mean, Sri Lanka is a small country. I mean, so it's very difficult to attract foreign investments given all these macro situations as well, because we are kind of in a vicious cycle sort of a thing, because of the COVID, the country cannot really have growth. I mean with that you can't really sell the country also for investments. So investments have dried out. That's
because we were also dependent on tourism.
Tourism is another, that's on the revenue side, and also I would say even the foreign remittances kind of things have slowed down to certain limits over the last couple of months maybe. So dollar, we are short of dollars. So we need, so because of that we had to come up with certain restrictions. I mean, of course import restrictions is one of those things, because I mean we can't pay for imports. So only and the other side we are struggling with some of the exports, because we are only doing certain export markets. So in that sense our dollar revenue has dried up, dollar investments have, so we don't have dollars to pay for imports. So naturally that restrictions are there. On top of that, the problem now we will face would be that while this is there, because of the global situation, the prices of some of these commodities and products will go up as well. So if you paid $1,000, you might have to pay $1,100, not because of the local situation, because of the global situation. So
that has impacted, I think, a lot of people.
So you might have to pay more dollars.
Mm.
Then because the global prices have gone up because of this shortages and things like that. So that's going to be another situation that will come up. So naturally we will have to we have to manage within the country, and I think the government is doing the right thing by trying to vaccinate and open up the country, and most of the countries have tried to do that. So because we need to, the easiest, the quick wins would be something like tourism. But of course, again, then the challenge would be to attract the tourists, given the current situation.
We have to convince them that it's
convince
safe here.
them and get them down here. And because now I saw some especially in places like now there's a new area which is called emerging, called travel advisory. Earlier they used to call travel agents, but now you call travel advisory, because if you want to go for a holiday, they will advise you where you need to go, right? Because and they advise mainly not to go cross border, within the country, try to be within, and even within that, now unlike Sri Lanka, in other countries there will be certain restrictions for pandemic, so those they have to adhere. So even when we open up, we may have to, I think we had a situation where we had the travel bubble, tourism bubble, and like that, you have to manage that. You might have to manage it. So it's going to be real challenging times. But I think by vaccinating, we vaccinated close to 9 million now, fully vaccinated. So which is a great achievement, and we have to do that, and we have to complete that and see how we can take the next step in maybe opening up the country and getting the tourists, and even maybe some foreign investors also to get out of this situation.
Exactly. And looking at this situation, tell us about the performance of the equity market.
Okay, it's I think one of the, we haven't seen this kind of a run in the history. We started I think year 2020 ended with something like 6,700, the all share price index, but now it's around 9,300. It in fact came close to 9,500 last week, and the market capitalization has increased from 3 trillion to 4 trillion over a period of 8 months. So it's a phenomenal performance, and the difference at this time is that the drive in the market has happened from a different set of shares as opposed to the normal set of shares, because earlier there were certain sectors, segments, or certain counters that really performed, that was driving the market, and that was mainly due to from the foreign investors. But this run is mainly sustained by the local investors. It's mainly retail and high net worth and the local. So that's the difference between this and the previous instances, and especially the foreign investors. No foreign at the moment. There's foreign outflow also given the current situation. But with all these challenges, the market has performed, and that drive has come from several, mainly because of our exchange rate issue. People are investing more on the exchange earned in companies. Also, there's another factor. The Sri Lankan interest rates are at a lower level. Over the last 1.5 years or so, the rates were at a very low level, and we haven't seen this kind of return rates at a long time. And last, I think we saw it in 2013 or 14, but now it's like at very low level. So people also don't have place to invest, because the FD rates, the savings accounts are giving very low returns. And most of the people who have cash, they don't have option. So the market has been performing, so they're getting into the market. And you look at SPI going close to 2,500 points, or 2,600 points. That's a great achievement. It's like almost like a 30-40% return. So people would want to get into that.
Exactly.
So that's happening now. I think doing so is good, but you have to consider so many factors.
Like in which sector to invest in is also something which we need to think
That's
about.
one. In addition to that, you have to look at your personal capacity also. One of the things is the liquidity. I mean, you may have a cash, say you may have 1 million rupees, you have to assess, okay, how soon I need to use it, how long I would need it to used. Can I afford it to have a, because if you look at a stock market investment, though the market has gone up from by about 20-30%, so 30-40% in over the last 8 months, it can go down as well. Same way, also you generally you don't see that kind of return over that short period. Generally, stock markets are long-term investments, but you advise as a long-term investment is because there are ups and downs in the market, and when you have a long-term investment, because you can't time the top when it's at the peak and also when it's at the bottom. So you have to ride the wave, and then you get a return over a period of time. So for that reason, you look at advise equity as a long-term, medium to long-term investment. So in this, it's a completely different scenario. So liquidity is very important. So if I have, say, some money which I need to use it within 1 month time, I shouldn't be putting that money, expecting I can get maybe 1 month I can get about 20% return.
You can only put your extra income into it.
Extra income, and also the liquidity. And the second principle is you should never borrow and invest. I mean, if you don't have excess money, you completely borrow. Say, for example, you borrow for a house, and then you take that money and then you invest and you lose it, then you
lose both.
Yeah,
the money and the house.
Yeah, or even a personal loan for that instance. You have to have the repaying capacity. So that's a very basic principle.
And now that we touched on the dollar rate and all that, Ruwan, I think many people want to make dollars now. So there's also other options like people getting into Binance and all that. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you have that option, but I think it's not officially available, because if you are going to invest overseas, you need to open a outward investment account, and then you need to convert into dollars. You invest, and then those dollars you can take it overseas and invest. But all these other instruments, other platforms are basically working outside that scheme. So I'm not sure whether, I mean, people may be investing, but it's basically, but it's out of the current scheme that is available for officially investing.
And it's also a bit risky, is it?
It's a bit risky. I mean, bitcoins, you can, I mean, it goes up like $50,000 one day, can go up $100,000 the next day. So, I mean, it's very risky, it's very volatile. And I think in Sri Lanka, I mean, first thing you need to understand is the amount of risk that you can afford to take. If I say I have 1 million, I want to invest this, and can I afford to lose that 1 million entirely, or 50% of that, 20% of that? What sort of capacity I'm willing to take the risk, and I have the capacity. So without assessing the risk, you should never increase your risk, because then the best form of investment would be in a basic instrument like a money market account or a fixed deposit or something like that, because you will earn interest, regular income. Your capital is pretty much preserved. So you get an income. So that's your that should be a basic investment. Then beyond that, if you are going to increase your risk, you need to first assess the test that I said, whether how soon I need the money, what sort of risk that I can afford to take, and how long I need to keep invested.
It's about knowing your capacity as well.
Yeah, exactly. You need to know your capacity. Without knowing, you try to enter, you're going to burn your hands. So it's absolutely, you need to be conscious about what you really can do and what you really want to do. Because if you try to be too much greedy, then you can lose part of entire money.
And Ruwan, are there any issues with regards to IPOs and debentures?
Now, I think this year we saw for the first time after a long time some IPOs getting listed in the stock market, which is a good sign. And even I think 1 or 2 companies been listed in the SME segment also, which is good. And even the debentures, So after a long time, debentures are coming into the market, especially some of the banks are issuing debentures, so which is a good sign. But of course, now as I said earlier, the stock market, one factor that supported was the low interest rates. The last, I think, at the last monetary board meeting, the central bank increased the policy rates by 50 basis points. So which means the rates are in the rise. But of course, it's not at the moment, though it has gone up by 50 basis points, it's not going to impact the market immediately. But it's a signal that the government want to increase the rates, right? And so that we have to wait till the next policy revision and see how much whether they want to increase or whether they want to keep it at these levels or whether they reduce. So at the moment the trend has been set upward. So when that happens, now even the debentures, debentures are generally a long-term instrument, 5 or 10 years. It depends on your, again, it's a listed debenture. You can exit from the stock. You can, because it's listed, you can exit from the stock market. So these rates also can go up, and those can be pretty much sometimes very safe over maybe 5-year period. So also the other factor that I forgot to tell is your age. I mean, for example, if you are a retiree who's living on your retirement income, you have to be very cautious about where you invest also. So then for that kind of thing, a debenture or with a good institution, I mean, you can invest for a longer time. So you have to evaluate your options, where also the point that you are investing also.
Right. And tell us a little bit about the impact on the budget as well, Ruwan.
Now, now I think there's upcoming budget, and government needs to find revenue also. So there will be certain changes or the proposals that will come up. So obviously, in anticipation of that could have impact on the markets also, because I mean, if the taxes increase, then there will be a impact on the companies or individuals. So those things could have impact on the markets also, because for example, if people feel that the government is going to increase taxes, corporates, then it's going to impact the share market prices also, because the performance of the companies are going to impact. So likewise, and which industry is going to be taxed, whether some companies, some industries might or sectors might get concession, some sectors might have increased taxes. So depending on that, the value of those companies could go up or down.
And how should one play with the share market?
If you are going to invest, you have to be very cautious first. If you are a first timer going to the market, you shouldn't just go and blindly invest it. You have to get advice. So there are some form, I mean, you can speak to a broker and see what his preferences, his advice, or you can go to a fund manager like us, I mean, who advise clients where to invest, what to invest, and which risk that they can take. Because one of the first things that we do is we try to understand the risk that the client can take. Based on that, we will advise them where to invest and what to invest. So stock market, you are investing, you need to understand whether how much of risk that you can take, as I said earlier, and you have to invest with the right advice. You need to take the right. So once you get the experience, you can be a pro.
Exactly. And with all that, I think it's time for us to wind up this session of business today as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Ruwan Perera, for enlightening us on the opportunities and about also what and how people should work or act accordingly with regards to the current situation, given the situation as well. Thank you so much for enlightening us on that.
Thank you very much for inviting me also, Sharifa.
It was a pleasure having you with us on the show today, and we've been talking to the Chief Operating Officer of NDB Wealth Management Limited, and he's also the President of the Unit Trust Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Ruwan Perera. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have yourself a pleasant night.